Welcome to Forgotten Shadows, a journey into the darker recesses of history where archives breathe, paper remembers, and forgotten relics reach beyond their silence. Tonight, we unearth a story buried in dust and ink, a tale that begins not with screams in the night, but with the quiet turn of a page in a county archive. But beware. What we uncover is not merely history. It lingers still, waiting. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, if you were handed a century-old guest register, would you dare touch its pages? And in which time and place would you imagine this story unfolding? Now, let us begin. In the depths of the Holloway County Records Office, a room without windows rests in perpetual twilight. It smells of paper dust, brittle glue, and damp stone. Row upon rows of shelves lean under the weight of forgotten minutes, handwritten testimonies, and the countless bureaucratic bones of the past. Among them, locked inside a leather-bound case, lies a book rarely spoken of by archivists. Its presence is not indexed, not catalogued, yet it is known. The Holloway Hotel Register. The register is ordinary at first glance, bound in cracked brown leather, with iron clasps on its sides. But its weight is unnatural. Archivists who have lifted it whisper that it pulls at the arms like an anchor, heavier than its size should permit. The pages within, yellow and brittle, begin in the year 1872. Neat copperplate handwriting records the names of travelers, merchants, salesmen, newlyweds, drifters, the everyday tide of a small-town hotel. But soon, the names begin to repeat themselves. At first, it seems like error. The same man signed his name twice, perhaps stayed another week. But the details change. The same handwriting, the same flourish of ink. But the date leaps forward by months, even years. A young woman checks in with her sister, and again 5 years later, though both had died in a carriage accident between those times. A traveling salesman signs in 3 separate times, though his obituary marks his burial after the first. Page after page tells the same story. People recorded in life, only to vanish from the thread of history thereafter. Archivists who discovered this anomaly noted another detail. None of the names are followed by a checkout. The columns where departure should have been carefully inked remain blank, as though once they entered, the guests belonged forever to the Holloway Hotel. The first archivist to touch the register, after its rediscovery in the 1920s, was a man named Albert Thorne. His notes remain in the margins of the archival files, preserved not as official record, but as scraps found in his desk drawer. He wrote of unease, of the strange weight of the book, of an odor he could not place, something metallic, something stale. Within weeks, his colleagues said he had grown pale and distracted. He spoke less, lingered long after closing hours, and was eventually found asleep at his desk with the register open before him. When asked what troubled him, Thorne left no answer. But in his private notes, one phrase repeats: "The hallway never ends." It was not until decades later that others would piece together his meaning. By the 1950s, Holloway County's archives underwent reorganization, and the register resurfaced again, pulled from storage by an unsuspecting graduate student. Within days, the same pattern returned: sleeplessness, unease, eyes ringed with exhaustion. She too scrawled fragments in her notebook. The carpet is red, the lamps flicker, the doors do not open. Each who touched the register reported the same dream: walking endlessly down a hallway, lined with closed doors, the air heavy with silence. The corridor stretches into infinity, repeating itself without variation. No windows, no stairwells, only the oppressive sameness of a place between arrival and departure. Some never woke normally from those dreams. They stirred in their beds, muttering, clawing at the sheets. Others walked in their sleep, pacing hallways, of their own homes until found by frightened family members. And yet, despite the whispers, the Holloway Hotel Register was never destroyed. It passed hands quietly, shuffled between storage rooms, forgotten and rediscovered with the passing of generations. Each rediscovery marked by the same descent into the same nightmare. The register's origins, however, tie back to a real hotel. The Holloway Hotel itself once stood at the edge of the county seat, a 3-story brick structure with wrought iron balconies. Built in 1871, it was meant to be a jewel of progress, welcoming travelers on the newly extended railway line. But in 1879, disaster struck. A fire gutted the upper floor. Reports vary. Some say a lamp overturned, others whisper of arson. Dozens perished. The bodies were buried quickly, the ruins demolished, the site paved over. The hotel itself vanished, but the register survived, salvaged from the flames and deposited quietly into the county's records. Its pages, signed at the edges, carry faint traces of smoke. Some believe the souls of those who burned that night is bound to their parchment, forever walking the halls they could not escape. But that does not explain the names added long after the fire, nor the fact that each new archivist who dares to brush a hand across its cover feels the same pull, the same dream, the same hallway. The story of the Holloway Hotel Register is not one of the past alone. It bleeds into the present, for the register remains in the archive still, and it waits. As the archivists who touched it wrote, each page is a threshold, each name an invitation, each dream a step deeper into the endless corridor of Holloway. But question remains, what lies at the end of the hallway? The Holloway Hotel Register does not simply sit in silence. It feeds upon curiosity. Each generation brings fresh hands to its leather-bound cover, and with each touch, the same nightmare spreads, weaving itself into the lives of those who dared to study it. The county records contain no official file marked with its name. But if one follows the paper trail of resignation letters, sudden illnesses, and unexplained disappearances among the archivists of Holloway County, a darker pattern begins to emerge. A pattern written not in ink, but in absence. The earliest case tied directly to the register remains Albert Thorne, the archivist of the 1920s. His scrawled notes hinted at the red carpet, the flickering lamps, the endless hallway. But his descent was not immediate. It was gradual, like the slow turning of a key in a lock. At first his colleagues noticed his meticulous handwriting beginning to tremble. His well-ordered records became disjointed, numbers misaligned, letters slipping. Soon after he complained of waking each morning with sore feet, as if he had walked miles through the night. Weeks later, he began leaving the archive at closing time, only to return within hours, found wandering the shelves long after midnight. His final entry in the staff journal reads simply, "I am not alone in the hallway anymore." One autumn morning, Thorne did not arrive for work. His home was searched, but he was gone. The bedclothes lay twisted, as if from a struggle. On the nightstand sat a single object, the Holloway Hotel Register, its claps unlocked, its pages smashed open. Thorne's name had been added in his own hand, the last to appear on that page. He never checked out. For decades, his disappearance was whispered, but never spoken of openly. Yet the register waited. The next documented victim emerged in 1954. A graduate student, Anna Carlisle, had been assigned to catalog the miscellaneous hotel records of Holloway County. She was young, ambitious, drawn to the glamour of research. She wrote excitedly to her advisor about a remarkable survival from the fire, referring to the register. But the letters changed tone within days. Her writing became erratic, circling back to one image, the corridor. She described pacing it in her dreams, counting the doors, always 7 on each side before the pattern was repeated. She wrote of hearing faint breathing behind the closed doors, as though unseen guests lined the rooms but refused to emerge. After 3 weeks, she reported a new detail. The register, she claimed, changed each time she touched it. A new name would appear, faint, at first, as though written in water, before the ink deepened into permanence. She insisted she had seen her own name form, slowly, across the page. Her final letter was never mailed, but found tucked inside her notebook. It ended in mid-sentence. The carpet stains are darker now, and I think Carlyle was discovered lifeless, at her desk, her body slumped over the open register. The coroner listed the causes as exhaustion and malnutrition, but her hands were raw, the skin peeled at the soles of her feet, as though she had walked without pause. And again, her name was there, entered, never checked out. By the 1970s, rumors about the register had spread beyond Holloway County. Archivists whispered of it during conferences, calling it the book that writes you back. A few brave or reckless researchers traveled to Holloway in search of the artifact. Each followed the same path: fascination, sleepless nights, dreams of the hallway, and finally, disappearance. The county quietly shifted its handling of the book. It was moved repeatedly, first to a locked cabinet, then to a basement vault. But no matter how carefully hidden, it was always found again. For the register seemed to call out, drawing seekers to it like a beacon. Perhaps the most chilling case emerged in 1989. A young archivist named Peter Lyle documented his experience meticulously in a series of tape recordings, which survive to this day. His voice, calm at first, grows strained over the weeks as he recounts each night's progression. On the first tape, he describes the hallway as empty, lined with lamps that buzz faintly, their light sicklies yellow. By the fifth tape, he claims to hear footsteps echoing behind him, though when he turns, the hallway remains unchanged. On the ninth, his breathing is shallow, panicked. He whispers that he finally tried to open one of the doors, but the handle burned his hand as though it was searing hot. The 10th and final tape is nearly inaudible. Lyle's voice trembles as he repeats one phrase: "I saw them," standing at the end. The recording ends abruptly. Lyle was never seen again. When the register was checked afterward, his name appeared, written in neat ink, identical to his handwriting. Each case adds another layer to the register's legend, yet the pattern never varies. Those who touch it dream of the hallway. Those who dream of the hallway do not return. Their names fill the book's pages, unbroken by departures. What is most unsettling, however, is not only the fates of those lost, but the implication left behind in their scattered notes and fragments. For each, it described the hallway differently at first: longer, shorter, dimmer, brighter. But over time, their accounts began to converge, aligning detail by detail, until it seemed they were all walking in the same place. The same carpet, and the same lamps. The same endless red corridor where others were already pacing, unseen but nearby. The Holloway Hotel Register is no mere artifact. It is a passage. And each who touches it is drawn a little further inside. The Holloway Hotel was not built for eternity, though eternity is what it found. In 1871, it rose brick by brick at the edge of the county seat, a grand structure meant to announce Holloway's arrival into prosperity. 3 stories high, crowned with wrought iron balconies and gas-lit halls, it was hailed as the pride of the railway line. Its register was the heartbeat of the place, an orderly ledger of arrivals and departures, lives passing briefly through its rooms. For 8 years, the hotel thrived. But in the summer of 1879, Holloway's jewel became its grave. Accounts of the fire remain contradictory, fragmented, their details scorched as surely as the building itself. Local newspapers reported that a kerosene lamp had been knocked over in a guest room. Survivors claimed the fire spread too quickly, as though it had leapt from wall to wall with unnatural speed. Some whispered of sabotage, of unpaid debts, and a deliberate torching. What is certain is that the blaze began on the upper floor. Guests were trapped almost immediately. The central staircase, the only means of escape, became a funnel of fire. Those who reached the balconies found themselves faced with a terrible choice: leap into the street below or burn within the inferno. Witnesses recalled figures silhouetted against the flames, screaming unheard above the roar. Dozens perished. That night, families traveling westward, salesmen stopping for the week, young newlyweds on their honeymoon. The hotel's guest list was full, every room occupied. Yet when the fire had finished its feast, little remained but blackened stone and twisted iron. And yet, through some cruel twist, the register survived. Pulled from the smoldering wreckage, its cover scorched but intact, its ink as legible as the day it was written. A relic spared while the people it recorded were reduced to ash when county officials reviewed the register. They noticed something strange. Every guest who had been staying in the hotel that night was accounted for on its pages, their names written clearly in the careful hand of the desk clerk. But the column for departures remained blank, and it has remained blank ever since. The Holloway Hotel fire marked the first moment when names began to return to the register after death. Survivors remembered fellow guests who had perished, yet in the years that followed, the same names appeared again in the book, written in their original hand, as if they had returned to check in once more. It was as though the fire had transformed the hotel from a building of brick and mortar into a place of memory and shadow. The real hotel collapsed into rubble, but its ghost endured. An endless hallway of red carpet and flickering lamps, born in the smoke of 1879. And the register became the key. The dreams of later archivists echo the final moments of those who perished. They describe the heat pressing against the walls, the carpet darkening beneath their feet, the lamps buzzing faintly as if struggling for air. They speak of closed doors, behind which whispers and scratching sounds suggest the presence of unseen guests. Those doors, it is believed, lead to the rooms of the Holloway Hotel as it once was. Rooms filled with travelers who never escaped. Rooms where the fire still lingers, burning without smoke, heat without flame, suspended in the corridor of eternity. Fragments of local testimony from 1879 suggest the same horror. A fireman who survived the blaze claimed he heard voices calling from the upper floors long after the building had collapsed, though no one remained inside. Another witness, a woman, who had fled the second-floor balcony, swore she saw people still moving in the flames, pacing back and forth behind the windows, even as the structure crumbled. Whether these were hallucinations born of shock or glimpses into what the Holloway Hotel had become, no one can say. But the connection between the fire and the register cannot be denied. The theory that emerged over time is chilling. When the flames consumed the hotel, the souls of its guests did not depart. Instead, they were inscribed upon the pages of the register, bound not by death, but by the ink that had marked their arrival. The absence of a checkout column was no accident. It was a prison, and so the guests remain. Each name in the book is a presence in the hallway. Archivists who dream of that place are not alone. They walk among the restless, the trapped, the forever unreturned. But what of the names added long after the fire? How can they too appear within the register's pages? The answer lies not in 1879 alone, but in the decades that followed. For the Holloway Hotel ceased to exist in brick and stone, but it continued in shadow, a place between sleep and waking, between memory and death. Those who touched the register stepped into that place, their names claimed, their souls added to the ledger, as though they too had once checked in. The Holloway Hotel became not only a graveyard of the fire's victims, but a living trap, expanding its guest list with each passing decade. The register did not end in 1879. It began there. By the early 20th century, whispers spread through Holloway County. Families whose loved ones had vanished, archivists, students, researchers, began comparing stories. Some swore they heard footsteps in their homes at night, the sound of pacing outside their bedroom doors. Others claimed to glimpse figures in the corner of their vision, dressed in 19th century garb, faces pale with smoke and ash, always walking, always searching, always waiting for the hallway to end. The Holloway Hotel fire was not a tragedy that ended in ashes. It was a spark that birthed something endless. History does not always sleep. Sometimes it stirs, reaching forward to those who dare to measure it. By the late 20th century, the Holloway Hotel Register had become more than an archivist's curiosity. Whispers of its power spread quietly among local historians, folklore enthusiasts, and eventually, paranormal investigators. The register was no longer confined to the dim rooms of Holloway County's archive. It had entered the realm of legend. The county itself remained cautious, rarely acknowledging its existence. Yet requests to view the book increased, often denied, sometimes granted under strict supervision. Those who managed to touch its pages, however, rarely left unscathed. Their accounts, written in journals, spoken into tape recorders, captured on film, would deepen the register's sinister reputation. The first serious attempt at investigation came in 1977. A small group of university researchers interested in the psychology of folklore were granted access to the archive.
Their plan was simple: to expose the Holloway Hotel Register as nothing more than superstition, an artifact imbued with rumor. They brought cameras, notebooks, and a reel-to-reel audio recorder. One of them, a psychology student, volunteered to
be the first to touch the book. The moment her hand brushed its cover, the tape recorder picked up a low, steady hum, though the room was silent. Within hours, she reported the familiar dream: the endless hallway, the flickering lamps, the oppressive silence. She described pacing through it, her footsteps echoing too loudly in her ears. The doors lining the hall did not move, but she swore she felt something breathing behind them. The recordings from that night still exist. On the tape, her voice trembles, as she describes the dream in real time, speaking into the microphone after waking. But in the background of her account, something else emerges: faint footsteps, perfectly synchronized with hers, though no one else moved in the room. The researchers dismissed it at first as an audio glitch. Yet by the third night, 2 other members of the team had begun to dream of the hallway as well, though they had not touched the book. Whatever presence it carried seemed to spread outward, seeping into those who merely lingered near it. By the end of the week, the project was abandoned. One of the teams, unable to sleep, withdrew from university altogether. Another was found pacing his dormitory in the dead of night, muttering that he could not find the stairwell. The tapes were boxed, filed away, and forgotten by the institution. But they were not the last. In the 1990s, as paranormal research gained popularity, the Holloway Register drew a new wave of attention. Ghost hunters arrived with camcorders and electromagnetic sensors, eager to capture what legend suggested. Some were turned away by county officials. Others succeeded in sneaking glimpses of the book. One group in 1996 managed to film their session. The footage is grainy, but it shows a young man placing his hand upon the register's open page. His face slackens. His pupils dilate. He sits silently for nearly 2 minutes, staring down at the length of the reading room as though transfixed. When the others shake him, he stirs, blinking, unable to recall what had just occurred. When the tape is slowed, however, a disturbing detail emerges. For a single frame, the image of the reading room stretches unnaturally. The shelves seem to warp into the shape of a corridor, red carpeting bleeding faintly across the screen. And in the far corner, where no wall should exist, a flicker of yellow light appears, like a lamp burning in the distance. The camcorder jammed soon after. The tape was recovered, but the young man was not the same. His friends reported that he no longer slept soundly, often waking in sweat, his feet blistered as though from long walks. Within months, he disappeared entirely. His name, they later claimed, was found within the register itself. Technology seemed powerless against the register. Microphones picked up sounds no ear could hear. Footsteps, faint breathing, the scratching of fingernails along wood. Cameras produced distortions, corridors appearing where none existed. Electromagnetic meters surged and spiked without explanation. Yet the most unsettling evidence came not from the devices, but from the investigators themselves. In 2003, a professional paranormal team entered the Holloway archive with digital recorders and thermal imaging cameras. They planned to broadcast their findings. The footage, however, never aired. According to accounts from those who handled the raw files, every camera recorded something different. One showed the researchers sitting quietly around a table. Another showed them pacing an endless red hallway, their faces vacant, their movements mechanically. A third showed the same table, but empty. No sign of the team at all. The sound, too, fractured. Overlapping layers of audio whispered in and out, the voices of the investigators, muffled screams, the crackling of fire, and faintly, the shrill ringing of a hotel desk bell. By dawn, the team had fled. One of them later confessed that during the session, each of them had fallen asleep for a moment, though none recalled closing their eyes. In their dreams, they walked together down the hallway, each aware of the others pacing beside them. But when they turned to look, they saw only strangers' faces scorched, hollow-eyed, mouths frozen in silent cries. The digital files were eventually destroyed, or perhaps hidden. Only fragments of still images remain, circulating online as blurred, uncanny photographs. The county made no official comment, and still, the register endures. Despite every failed investigation, every fractured tape and corrupt image, the Holloway Hotel Register continues to sit in its case, waiting. Some whisper that the act of recording only feeds it, that the attempt to capture its essence with machines gives it more strength, more presence. Each photograph, each audio clip, another door opening in the endless corridor. What is clear is this: the Holloway Hotel is not just a dream. It is a place that touches the waking world, and with every new investigation, it grows more defined, more solid, more real. The guests remain, the hallway waits, and the register continues to claim names, one after another. The endless hallway is not silent. It waits. It breathes. And at its edges, lined on both sides, stand the doors. For most who dreamed of the Holloway Hotel, the corridor remained sealed. The doors loomed, numbered but mute, their brass handles cool to the touch. The dreamers walked and walked, but the doors never yielded. They remained as they had been the night of the fire, thresholds locked against salvation, barriers to a world that could no longer escape. But over time, a few claimed otherwise. Their accounts, scattered across journals, interviews, and private notes, are fragmented, feverish, often ending abruptly. Yet together they sketch a picture of what lies beyond those doors, and why they are better left unopened. The earliest attempt is believed to be that of Anna Carlyle, the graduate student who died in 1954. In her notebook, among descriptions, of pacing the corridor, one line stands apart. I tried the handle. It burned. The words are underlined 3 times, the ink blotched as though written in shaking hands. Beneath, in smaller script, I heard them on the other side. No further details survive. But her burned palm at the time of her death suggests she succeeded, if only for a moment. Decades later, in the recordings left by Peter Lyle in 1989, his voice breaks when he whispers, I tried one of the doors. It opened. The tape ends there. He was never seen again. What did he see? Other accounts provide hints. In the 1990s, a Holloway resident named Marcus Ellery claimed to have touched the register while intoxicated. Unlike the archivists and researchers before him, his experience was never formally recorded, but fragments were preserved through interviews with friends. He spoke of walking in the hallway night after night until curiosity overcame him. One evening, he said, he twisted a handle and found it yielded beneath his grip. Inside, he saw a hotel room, number 17, he claimed, but it was not intact. The walls were charred, the wallpaper curled and blackened. The bed had collapsed into ash, the window melted into glass rivulets along the floor. And yet, he insisted, the room was not empty. Figures moved within the smoke. They were not alive, yet neither were they gone. Their forms flickered, caught between body and shadow, faces twisted in the moment of their last breath. One turned toward him, its mouth open in a silent scream, eyes dark with endless reflection. Ellery shut the door, fled the hallway, and woke in terror. For weeks, he refused to sleep. He drank heavily, muttering that if he closed his eyes, the door would open on its own. Eventually, he disappeared. His name was later found in the register. Others who described opening the doors echoed his experience. Some rooms appeared as they might have before the fire, beds neatly made, curtains tied back, pitchers of water waiting on the nightstand. But always, something was wrong. The air shimmered with heat, as though the fire was still smoldering. The lamps flickered with unnatural rhythm. The shadows bent too sharply against the walls, and in every account, the rooms were occupied. Guests still lingered, but not as they once had been. Some sat at desks, writing endlessly with pens that never touched paper. Others stood at the windows, staring into smoke-filled skies that stretched far beyond the frame. Some lay on their beds, turning restlessly, their mouths opening and closing in the mimicry of breath. None acknowledged the dreamer, yet each radiated an unmistakable pull, a sense that they knew someone had entered and would not let them leave again. Those who saw the room seldom survived long after. Their health withered, their sleep grew restless, and their bodies bore the marks of fire, blistered skin, scorched lungs, blackened nails. To open a door was to invite the Holloway Hotel fully into oneself, and few endured the crossing. But what lies deeper than these fragments, deeper than the hallucinations of flame and shadow? Some believe the doors are not simply rooms, but traces of the last moments lived by each guest who perished in 1879. To enter is to relive their death, again, until one's name becomes another line in the register. One modern investigator, whose notes were found but whose body was never recovered, wrote a final chilling theory. He believed the hallway was not infinite at all. He claimed the doors, if opened in the correct sequence, would eventually lead to the staircase of the hotel itself, downward, always downward, into the heart of the fire where it began. He never proved his theory. His final note reads, "The smoke is thicker now. The doors are opening on their own." The most disturbing detail, however, is this. Each account places the dreamer in a different section of the hallway, with doors numbered differently, arranged uniquely. Yet when they describe the rooms inside, the details converge. Room 17, Room 24, Room 31, all are described in identical ways, as though each door leads to the same destination. It suggests the rooms are not separate. They are one. A single chamber of the Holloway Hotel endlessly multiplied. A trap woven from the death throes of dozens of guests, repeated like a refrain. And still the doors wait. For most who dream of the hallway, they remain locked, offering only whispers and scratching sounds. But for the unlucky few, they open. And once they are open, they never close again. The hallway stretches on, its lamps flickering, its carpet darkening beneath unseen footsteps. The doors line the walls, waiting for hands curious enough, or desperate enough, to turn their handles. And beyond them, the guests linger, patient in their eternal stay. For more than a century, the Holloway Hotel has existed only as ash, rumor, and archive. Yet through the register, through the dreams of the endless hallway, its presence persists. And those who followed the corridor long enough came to believe it must have an ending, that no path, however infinite, is truly without conclusion. Among The most haunting fragments of research is a sheaf of papers attributed to Dr. Miriam Haas, a cultural historian who vanished in 2002. She had traced dozens of dreamers' accounts, aligning them with floor plans, witness testimony, and newspaper archives of the fire. Her conclusion was stark. The hallway leads not outward, but inward. Every door folds back into the hotel itself. If one walks long enough, one will arrive at the source of the fire. Her final notes were never published. They recovered from her locked study after her disappearance. The last page contains only a line written in pencil. "I hear the staircase." Other accounts echo her conclusion. A man in Ohio in 1978, bedridden by illness, claimed that night after night he descended steps inside his dreams, the carpet wet with soot, the rail burning beneath his touch. A woman in Toronto, 1995, described a stairwell with no end, smoke, rising through cracks in the boards. Each insisted the same, that the corridor does not stretch forever but funnels its victims downward. And what waits below? Fragments tell us, a chamber blackened by flame, walls split open by heat, floorboards collapsed into a glowing pit of embers that never cool. And in its center, resting on a stand of twisted iron, sits the register. Not a copy, not a dream, but the original, burned, half-charred, its pages still turning on their own. Those who claim to have glimpsed this final chamber say the names inside are endless. Not only those who died in 1879, but every dreamer who has touched the register. Since, names written before death, binding them into its pages, ensuring the Holloway Hotel will never truly fade. But there is something worse. At the bottom of the register are blank lines, spaces waiting to be filled. And each time a dreamer opens a door, each time they descend the stairwell, the pen appears, thin, black, waiting, as though the book itself is always hungry for more. The fire may have consumed the building, but the hotel never died. It transformed into something else, an archive of the lost, a ledger of human names, a record that writes itself until the last guest is taken. This explains perhaps why, after the fire, Holloway was erased. Records of it were systematically removed from city archives. Newspaper reports thinned, then vanished. Land deeds were lost. Even maps were redrawn to cover the site with a blank square of unmarked space. Someone, somewhere, knew what the hotel had become and worked to hide it. Yet despite their efforts, the register endured, passed through private collections, moved across continents, always surfacing again in libraries and estates. And wherever it went, new names followed. Today, the book is missing once more. No museum claims it, no archive admits to housing it. Yet the dreams continue. The hallway persists. Doors still wait for new hands to turn their handles, which means the register is still out there, hidden, waiting for the next curious soul to touch its cover. The Holloway Hotel is gone. But it is also eternal. It exists in fire, in shadow, in dream, and perhaps in you. Because if the register finds you, your name is already written. And so, dear historians, the story of the Holloway Hotel fades back into silence. Its ruins long vanished, its history erased, its memory preserved only in scattered accounts and the pages of a cursed ledger that refuses to die. But maybe the real question is this: would you open one of the doors? Would curiosity outweigh the risk of being trapped forever in the hotel's final night? Tell us in the comments below what you would do if faced with the endless hallway. Do you think the Holloway Hotel was a curse, a psychological projection, or something truly supernatural? If this story left you unsettled, there are many more waiting in the archives. Subscribe so you never miss the next descent into forgotten history and chilling legend.